I have seen thousands upon thousands of pitches where the entrepreneur meets with one or more investors, does usually a PowerPoint-like pitch, and tries to persuade the investors to put money into the company. Brian is probably one of the most skilled presenters and coolest persons I've ever seen in the hot seat of any presenters. I saw him win with 8 grilling, hard-nosed curmudgeon investors for 2 hours. For 2 hours in a conference room, be grilled to death. He never broke into a sweat, never flinched. He answered every question, logical. He was so prepared. And that's why those of us in the room afterwards put a lot of money into his company.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for watching last episode. We're back. We are back. This is episode
13 or 14. Now
15?
We're losing track.
I don't know what episode it is. Actually, that's really horrible. I actually have it right here in my notes. It's 14. This is episode 14. And I'm Tyler. This is John. We're your hosts of the Startup Ignition podcast. But today we are joined by Brian. And Brian is a special guest because he was just on another podcast, but we're lucky enough to have you on this podcast. Brian Beutler of Alianza. He's the CEO, founder of Alianza. And I'm not super familiar with what Alianza does. I had to go to ChatGPT.
I may be a little familiar with it.
Yeah, you have
a lot familiar with it.
Yeah, a lot familiar with it. But you need to correct me if I'm wrong here. But I have a description. It's Alianza is a leading cloud communications platform that enables service providers. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay,
totally.
Because we need to dive into that because I'm not super familiar with that, what that means or what it is. But I just heard of it from my dad, from passing, from your history, from the education and the mentorship that we do. He brings you and your war stories up all the time. So I'm super excited to talk about those today.
Let me tee this up for the viewers and listeners. Okay. Brian Beutler, CEO, founder of Alianza, is perhaps I have seen thousands upon thousands of pitches where a pitch to investors is where the entrepreneur meets with one or more investors, does usually a PowerPoint-like pitch, and tries to persuade the investors to put money into the company. Brian is probably one of the most skilled presenters and coolest persons I've ever seen in the hot seat of any presenters. Just to flash forward, and then we'll talk about more detail. I saw him win with 8 grilling, hard-nosed curmudgeon investors for 2 hours. For 2 hours in a conference room, be grilled to death. He never broke into a sweat, never flinched.
Do you remember this?
Do I remember it? Yeah, of course I remember.
He answered every question, had answers, logical. He was so prepared. And that's why those of us in the room afterwards put a lot of money into his company.
Yeah, totally. Successful.
Yeah,
it worked.
So everybody should listen to this if you want to see a CEO that knows how to raise money and be good in the hot seat.
And not only that, we refer a lot of people to Brian just because of the war stories and learnings that he's had.
Pay it forward and mentor back.
Brian is a very you're a big arrow in our quiver that we give to a lot of entrepreneurs for just learnings, right?
Like
you know what you're doing,
awesome,
right?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, let me finish this bio on him real quick.
Go for it.
Okay.
That was a great side story because I went back all the way to your college days of GetPhone, right? Okay, I'm not super familiar. I don't know if you remember GetPhone. Do you remember GetPhone?
Alianza 1.0.
Is that the one with your father?
Yeah, that's Mexico.
Original.
That's the original story doing multinational VoIP for international.
And then before that, you guys were in the long distance business.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we'll jump into that when we get into your history. But just recently, I found out that Utah Business published an article of you CEO of the Year.
Yeah.
2025.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
we
cool.
have CEO of the Year on our podcast.
Yeah. I mean, when I looked that up, I was like, dang, Brian, go Brian.
And does he deserve it or what? He does, yes.
So that's huge. That's a huge feather in your cap too, as well. Not just Alianza and the war stories you have, but the success that Alianza is having right now and where you've taken it. That's amazing. Outside of that, just a great all-around dude. mentor, advisor, and are you doing investing now? Are you doing some investing? A little bit of investing. I know that was on the table.
Yeah, I still love the primary kind of focus being on Alianza, but I do a little bit where I find kind of an overlap of passion.
Because you're still day-to-day operational.
It's been a long
all
run.
in.
It's been a long run for
100%.
Brian, but he has taken chips off the table now, which is exciting.
Okay, but I still don't want to jump right into your history. On our podcast, Brian, we always take our guests and we take like 3 to 5 minutes and we do an icebreaker game.
All right.
Just to have some fun. So I'm going to do an icebreaker game with you. We're going to play a quick game of this or that, and you're going to tell me which one you prefer.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And these are going to be modern tech solutions and platforms, and you tell me which one you prefer over the other. Just quick. What's your
just
snap?
quick.
And
All
you,
right.
you can participate too. Do you want to participate? You both will do it.
Okay.
Slack or Discord?
Slack.
Slack.
I like Discord because I'm not a big fan of Slack.
Yeah, okay. I knew you were going to say Discord. Quora or Reddit?
Reddit.
I like them both, but Reddit has become better than Quora to me. Yes.
I agree with that too. Quora, if 10 years ago it was Quora, now I think it's Reddit. Notion or Evernote? Do you use either of those?
Big power Evernote user, migrating to Notion right now.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. How about, have you used either one of them?
Evernote for more than a decade.
Yeah,
and I
Evernote's been
have a
around.
paid account. One thing that's annoying, Evernote though really I think blew it in terms of having to pay extra to have it on 2 different devices at the same time. That
was
really
it for me.
bothered-
Yeah.
Is that for you too?
Yeah,
I
totally.
think Evernote, if you're listening, that was a huge mistake. You're losing us as users.
Let's see if we can influence Evernote from the small startup ignition
Absolutely.
podcast.
Evernote really made it annoying. And also sometimes Evernote you can't log into.
Okay,
Yeah.
next one. Zoom or Google Meet?
Neither.
Neither.
No way.
What are you using? Teams?
Alianza. Like, come on. No. So we have our own UC client that we
You
use.
do?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Really?
Yeah, look. And if I was to use one of the big 3, I would say no to both of those, and I would say Teams.
Teams?
100%.
Really?
Yeah, interesting.
Okay.
Dude, we're a big Microsoft shop now. So
That's
like,
okay. You gotta.
You'll hear the rest of the story.
And,
but of course,
and for me, between those two, I'm going to tell you 50-50 between those two for me. So that's
Zoom
my answer
and
because
Google
I
Meet?
used to be more Zoom, but Meet is very convenient and because of the frequent use. But hey, we got to check yours out now.
Yeah.
you do.
Throw us over one of those subscriptions, dude.
Let's go.
Stripe or PayPal?
Stripe.
I agree.
Yeah, Stripe because of how it fits in.
The integrations,
yeah.
the dev.
But I'm going to get in trouble with Stripe because Stripe's amazing. But once you've got Stripe for a year or two in a company, it becomes you can shave and make a little extra money by finding another way to go because Stripe's pretty expensive.
But it's easy to start.
as
Super
in
easy.
startup, but it is more expensive than other solutions.
Okay, I already know the answer to this one because of your previous answers. We're getting to know you pretty well. AWS or Azure?
Both.
Really?
Yeah, I'm gonna switch it on both of these. Like,
Really?
depends on the application and what we're
And
doing.
what you're doing.
I mean, look, we have a really long-standing relationship with AWS. Awesome partner.
Yeah.
We just bought a company out of Azure for operators,
Uh-huh.
and they've become really great partners and a really big part of what we're doing going forward. So
That's cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Figma or Adobe XD or just the Adobe suite?
Adobe.
Adobe. Same.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
GitHub or GitLab? Do you know? Are you familiar with Git repositories or do any kind of coding stuff?
Yes, but I would say defer to my team.
Yeah, defer to your
I
team.
don't
Okay. Here, this one's
What
more
what do you say? I want to know because you're the most coder in here, probably.
GitHub. GitHub.
Get up. Okay.
Yeah. Spotify or Apple Music?
Apple Music.
I'm Spotify.
I'm Spotify
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, the Spotify's got the.
My wife is Apple Music.
the-
I pay both subscriptions.
Yeah,
so
the family deal on Spotify is awesome.
yeah, that is great. Okay, Tesla or Lucid Motors? Have you seen the Lucid cars?
I have.
Yeah, I think they're
I
pretty
mean,
slick.
look, I like the underdog, so I'd go with Lucid.
Lucid?
And
Here, this is Mr. Tesla.
I just have a Tesla Plaid, the fastest car ever made, stock car, right?
Yeah.
Except for Lucid just tested 0.1 seconds faster 0 to 60.
Okay, this one's a three-headed beast, and then we're almost done. ChatGPT, Bard, or Gemini? I'm sorry, Grok or Gemini?
Yeah, ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. What do you do?
What, are you doing 3 there? Or
Yeah,
2?
I did 3.
Which are they?
All the 3 main ones. So
I use-
Gemini, Grok, and ChatGPT.
I am using Grok more, but I'm starting to use Gemini again more.
We could also do Claude. We could also
Yeah.
do.
I was totally ChatGPT. All of a sudden, then I went to Grok, and Grok was amazing. And now, and Gemini's coming up too. Now they keep getting better.
Okay, iOS or Android?
iOS.
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 Okay, so TikTok or Instagram Reels?
TikTok. Sorry.
Do you do either one of them?
Not as much as you guys, that's for sure. But I probably am more TikTok because it's easier. And Instagram, for some reason,
Is not?
is not as
I do
easy to
Instagram.
me.
That's interesting.
My wife would say Instagram.
Yeah, I kind of
10
grew up
times out of
on
10.
Instagram. Like my college generation, that's when Instagram launched, and so like I've just always been on Instagram.
Because actually,
I look at TikTok as like Gen Z.
and see, for me as a boomer, which you guys think is really old, is that I probably access those more on my laptop than on my phone.
Wow.
That's insane.
That is.
I know.
That's
weird.
crazy.
That's a
know.
weird use case.
Yeah.
I know, isn't it?
Okay, last one, and then we're done. I promise. Airbnb, VRBO.
Airbnb.
Airbnb.
Yeah, I used to be a huge favor of VRBO, but Airbnb now has better selection, better pricing, better flexibility.
Yeah, better user experience.
Yeah, but
Just
way
easier.
better.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
We got to
I
know
love it.
Brian pretty well.
Yeah, that's good.
Now let's get into the actual good stuff that people want to hear. It's just a fun game, get to know our guests. So thanks
it's
for
great.
everybody suffering through that. But I thought that was kind of a cool icebreaker. All right, here we go. Let's start at the very beginning. We want to hear your history. Maybe take us all the way back to that founding of Get Phone and working with your dad and doing all that. And then let's take it from there.
Look,
So
I love, like, in some ways, I feel like this fourth seat right here should be like my dad here, telling like this other part of the story. Because you got a father-son duo here.
Oh yeah, that would have been cool.
That would have been interesting. Let me tee it up for everybody because I'm from a related industry, and that's one thing the way we knew each other back in the
connected.
day. I was in 1984. The old telephone company, American Telephone and Telegraph, AT&T. It's not the same AT&T today.
Yep.
It dominated the world in telecommunications. It was the phone company.
Yep.
They called it Ma Bell because it was so monolithic.
Yeah, it was a monopoly, right?
And it got broken up in 1984, which changed the world. And that's probably when your father got into it.
Totally.
In 1984, they broke it into its 5 major business divisions, got split into 8 different companies having different pieces of it. To make a long story short, it had the local dial tone where you called people on a local copper wire. Then it had the metered long distance business where you had to pay to go anywhere beyond your local area to call somebody.
All the way up until 1980s, huh?
Per minute.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
past 1980s.
Yeah. 90s.
And then it had yellow pages and it had telephone equipment and different lines of business. So in 84 was a huge business change in America. For me, I got into the yellow page business because now I could compete more fairly with the phone company on yellow pages. Your family went into long distance service because now other people could offer long distance besides just the phone company, and it was extremely lucrative. You could be a reseller of long distance phone service and make a lot of money.
I tell people it was SaaS before SaaS existed because it was a subscription business and you would make money while people were making calls in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it was a subscription.
And what was Yellow Pages? Yellow Pages was Google before Google.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
And we all looked forward to getting our like yellow pages once a year, like land on your like porch, and you'd be like, get all the latest company information that had opened. Because back then, when you wanted to know what was playing in the movie theater, you'd like open the yellow pages, look up movie theaters, dial, and you'd listen to a recording that would tell you what was playing.
And so the phone company was so expensive for long distance that when the federal government said no, other people can now sell that and offer that, they would offer it at half the price or whatever of the phone company, and it was a heyday. So I imagine your father and then you, when you joined him, were selling long distance and making great sales because you could go into a business and say, hey, you spend $1,000 a year on long distance, I'll cut it to $500.
Yeah.
Totally. And so, cut my teeth watching my dad be an entrepreneur growing up, stuffing bills for we call it pick long distance, right? We'd pick your long distance carrier. And so kind of went around with him in the back of his truck, installing what we called like these dial around routers growing up in Texas and doing a little stint in Washington State, moving back to Utah, starting another business, doing the same thing. And somewhere along the line, we started playing around with voice over IP. And voiceover, John talks about like this big shift in the industry in the mid 1980s. Well, in 2000, when the internet became a thing, voice got disrupted in a massive way because prior to then, voice was all analog over copper wires. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to make a phone call, you had to have a phone connected to the public switch telephone network, copper analog network. In 2000, when the internet became a thing, people for the very first time could make phone calls over the internet. We could digitize the voice, put it over the internet protocols, run it over broadband, and then de-encrypt it on the far side, put it back on an analog handset, and make a phone.
And that changed the world forever because, and again, our viewers and listeners, when you see things like this happen, there's so much entrepreneurial activity possible.
Yep.
The voice and data systems were separate. Voice and data were separate. And all of a sudden, voice and data started merging into the same network. And that shook up literally, and when trillions was a lot of money, probably several trillions of dollars of business got put into a box, shaken up, and said, who's now going to be the entrepreneurial winner?
Yeah, totally. And I remember about this time, it's probably 2003, 2004, I went to the Utah Valley Big Business Expo, and they did it like the convention center at UVU. And the keynote speaker, I don't even remember who it was at the time. I think it was Paul Ahlstrom, the local Paul Ahlstrom. Was it Paul Ahlstrom? No, sorry.
Paul Allen.
Paul Allen. Yes,
Yeah, Paul Allen.
He goes Paul Allen the Lesser.
He calls himself Paul Allen the Lesser because he's not Paul Allen from Microsoft.
That's right.
Yeah,
So-
but one of the most prolific startup guys in the state of Utah. Yeah.
And Paul talked about the waves of technology. And he talked about how, you can go out and you can try to paddle under your own force, your own strength. But every once in a while, these waves come along that change industries. And he's like, if you can catch a wave, it's way more fun. It moves you faster and you're moving under a different type of energy. And when we saw voice over IP hitting the market in 2001, 2002, 2003, we thought this is the next big wave. And we were in the communications industry, and we thought this is going to disrupt everything.
I was going to say, how did you didn't just fall into it? You were in the industry, so you saw it happening before your eyes.
So it's interesting. Like I was kind of out of the industry and kind of I'm in the industry because my dad's in the industry.
Yeah.
But like a lot of sons, I'd had no desire to follow my dad into technology.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to be like the apple tree that was planted on the slope, and when the apple hit the ground, I'd like roll far away.
Yeah.
And that's like not unusual for sons that want to get out of their father's shadow. But I wanted to do something in outdoor recreation. Like I grew up working at REI. It was my dream job in high school. I'd do climbing wall in the summer and mountain bikes, and then the wintertime I'd work in the ski shop and tune snowboards. And it was like a dream come true. And when I got back from my mission to Chile, came back to Utah Valley, got a job offer to work for Brian Fruit at Timpanogos Cyclery back when it was a tiny little bike shop on Main Street in Pleasant Grove. And I saw a whole different part of the outdoor recreation industry that was run by a small scale entrepreneur who owned his own business rather than a big, large scaled national, international conglomerate that REI is. And there were things I loved about how Brian Fruit ran his business. I loved that it was like, he was behind the steering wheel and he controlled his own destiny. And I just learned a lot of things that were kind of at the junction of like this outdoor recreation industry and being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And so all those kind of seeds were being planted. And then one day my dad asked me to come into the office to help him move an air conditioner unit. He's like, I just need some muscle. Come help me move this. So I went in, and before I knew it, I was like at the whiteboard architecting a deal that he was working on. And we were like riffing on it and strategizing, and I found it like really intellectually stimulating. I was like, this is actually really fun. My dad's like, Brian, you should come do this with me. And so I was kind of sucked back into the family business. But that only lasted for a few years because the voice over IP thing, when it hit, we realized this is not part of the business my dad had built. This has got to be something completely separate. It's going to take funding. It's going to take a lot more to launch this business.
So long distance was literally still over copper wire.
Mm-hmm.
It was just metered so you could charge for it compared to unlimited use locally. But voice over IP is voice over internet protocol, and it was sending voice on a completely different network, and you also needed different equipment.
Yep.
So I just want our listeners and followers to just know exactly what.
But you were in the industry, so you saw the change happening. Because the reason I asked is for all the listeners and the viewers that are watching and saying, "Oh, well, Brian was at the edge of the internet or at the edge of this major shift." It's like, but how maybe what is the advice to the current modern entrepreneur that's like catching waves, like what your mentor said? You
don't catch waves sitting on the shore.
Yeah.
Right? Like the key here is
being in.
Be in.
Yeah.
Whatever you're in, be in. Like I think 95% of all great business ideas are going to come because you're already in an industry, you're already working, you're already actively engaged in something that intellectually stimulates you. And then you have another idea about how you can do it a little bit better. Or you see a change coming, or you see a wave coming.
The good thing is waves don't stop.
Yeah.
Right?
There's
waves
always
are continuously happening.
All the time. And we tend to sometimes look around at what's going on social media, what's going on in Crunchbase. And we think,
AI.
oh yeah, I missed that wave.
Yeah.
I missed my shot. Like, I can't believe that was the company I would have started. How many times have we looked around and said, I had that idea and I talked about that idea 10 years ago, and then you see somebody do it and you're like, if only, right?
So I do remember thinking that about you a little bit. I was like, oh yeah, of course my dad made a lot of money and took a company IPO because he was in the .com era. Like, everybody was doing that at the
but
time.
there's already been 2 or 3 cycles since the .com.
I
And
know.
there will be
So the
more
waves
cycles.
keep coming. That's the whole point for the viewer is like,
Yeah.
you just have to you're right, be in, identify, and execute,
Yeah.
right?
And the well never runs dry. Like, we talk about this analogy, like there's always more water in the well. It always fills back up.
Yeah.
I like to say to people too, is when you get bothered by something too, you say, oh, why is it done this way? It could be so much better. I could fix it. It could be better. And then people just don't act on that. What I tell them is, when you think something needs to be fixed, why don't you see if you can fix it and create a great company from it?
Yes. When John talked about in the beginning, he was very complimentary of my ability to pitch and fundraise. One of the big keys of pitching and fundraising is try to have an emotional connection with your audience that identifies the pain.
Yeah.
Right? If you can identify the pain, the problem, like John just talked about, then you can start articulating the solution. And if you can convince folks, and this isn't just about funding, this is about getting team members to join you, getting partners to partner up with you.
As a founder, you're always selling to someone.
You're always selling. You're always kind of in this mode of pitching.
Yep.
Right. So
CEO's job number 1, sell, sell, sell.
Okay, so you discovered VoIP. Let's go from there then. So you thought, let's move from long distance. Did your father go into the VoIP business with you too? Or
yes, my dad
did you
was kind of at the end of his career, and he's kind of like, Brian, like, I really don't want to do this as part of Beeline Long Distance, the family business. So I started kind of incubating this idea on the side, formed the company, formed the kind of LLC Alianza.
And you're going to school?
And I'm going to school at BYU, studying history.
Where we met.
Yeah, where we met. I'm taking John's entrepreneurial lecture series class. And so this business idea is kind of just incubating over here on the side. I took the GMAT. It's my senior year of school. I'm planning on going to business school. Did really well on the GMAT, had a lot of opportunity there. And I was taking the entrepreneurial lecture series class for the second time. It was the best class experience I ever had in the university.
Yeah.
So much so that after I got my grade the first time, second semester came around, I decided to take the class again and just audit it. And I was like, so I signed up again and I took it again. And it was during that second semester that the announcement was made about the business plan competition. And I thought, all right, well, where are we going to put this voice over IP technology to use? And we kind of had a use case around international long distance that would really change the game. And our whole thesis was around, there's international enterprises that have operations on different sides of international borders. And the local calling is, relatively cheap. Long distance calling is extremely expensive. International toll calling back then, $2-3 a minute was not uncommon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A minute to make an international call between United States and Mexico, United States and Brazil, Argentina, Chile, like you name it. And so our idea was, let's take that phone call and let's go sign up these enterprise customers, put little pieces of equipment on both sides of the border next to their phone systems, and let's put that call onto the internet. And let's make it essentially what we call an on-net phone call.
Yeah.
And we said, if you go with us for on-net calls, we're going to make them free. We're not going to charge you anything. But then when you make those other little local toll calls, we're going to charge you for those, and we're going to make a little bit of money.
Yeah. And so that was the first business model of Alianza.
That was it. And that was the business plan and the business plan competition.
And that's what you took to the competition.
That's exactly what we did.
Do you remember that pitch?
Yes.
You do? Mm-hmm. Was he a judge or
I was
John was
involved,
involved and a mentor.
Yeah.
And this is like
because you were in his class, so you guys have already met.
Well, that was a lecture series class, but I was also very involved in running the business plan competition, and he became one of the participants. And we wanted to make sure they were really well prepared and did well.
And this is one of the
business
big-
plan competition ran all year long, kind of just with preparatory things. And at the end of the school year, we brought in major investors to see the final pitches.
Yeah.
Yeah, nervous as could be, right? So I'm a 24-year-old. I'm like kind of taking the long route through school, working my way through school, working full time while I'm going to school. And at the end of the competition, they narrowed down to 12 out of the 64 teams. And you go through multiple rounds of kind of judging and so forth. And at the end, you have this boardroom in the Tanner building where we went, and there's 12 real legit investors, and you're pitching your idea to them. And then they make the final judgment call. Super invigorating, like really exciting and fun.
Was that the pitch session you're talking about, or was that later?
After that is when we had the investment, though, later with to
Utah
really talk
Angels,
about
early
yeah.
Utah Angels.
Yeah, it was a
group,
Utah Angels.
So that this investor group was just part of the business plan competition.
Judges.
Yeah,
They were
just
judging.
judges.
Yep.
But if you do well,
It's a springboard.
And BYU had one of the most successful business plan competitions in the country, and so if you do well at that, you're going to get lots of attention.
So is that the connecting piece? Like you did pretty well in that. You got pretty high and or won.
Yeah, no,
and
we won it. We won the whole thing,
Oh, you
which was
won
weird
it.
because there was 64 teams. It was me and my co-founder Scott Bell, and neither one of us was an MBA student. Every other single team was a conglomerate of MBA students.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
built their business plan.
Yeah.
Well,
Like it was super.
I think John has his opinions on the MBA students. So there's no that's not.
It just yeah,
They're just not as risk tolerant. Let's just say, right?
yeah,
They'll
makes
come up
sense.
with great ideas,
Sure.
but they actually won't go out and execute.
Yeah.
You two were going out and executing, right?
yeah.
So that's the connecting piece from the business plan competition to the Utah Angels. Like how close were those two pitches?
It's a super fun story, but like I remember we won the business plan competition, and then John and Gary Williams were like, Brian, we want you to go do this. Like, let's figure out a way for you to like
Actually,
go start this company. And I was like,
yeah.
you guys, like you've read the business plan. You know that $64,000, as awesome as that is not going to launch this business.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we'll help you raise some capital. I was like, all right, well, what are we going to do? And there was a couple of different ideas. One was, and the first thing that like started the funding ball rolling for us is they said, let's publish an article in the Daily Universe. Let's put a picture of you with the big $64,000 check and your co-founder Scott Bell, and let's tell what Alianza is doing and how you're going to change the world. And then let's wait for the phone to ring. And the phone rang. I was stunned. The phone rang, and and then it rang again. And then we had, we kind of identified. We said we want to raise $2 million, which I thought was a little bit crazy, a little bit audacious. John and others seemed to think we could do it, and we had a core group of investors that were kind of circling around the deal, but I would call them very much friends and family, but not sophisticated investors. Like, and not even like if you think about like this hierarchy of like private equity, venture capital, kind of working your way down in kind of levels of sophistication, angels, and then you got kind of friends and family and people that know you and would invest in you and take a chance on you, but
Of course.
have no idea what they're getting into.
Yep.
We had a small group of friends and family that had kind of had, I would say, excited and supportive, but we're kind of looking around for, and who's the smart money that's gonna lead this?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where the Utah Angels come in. And that's where John brokered this meeting with Kyle Love and a bunch of other Utah Angels. And we got I don't remember, where was the meeting, John? Do you remember? Like
It was off campus, I believe.
Yeah.
I think in somebody's conference room here in Provo.
yeah, just some random
Well, we're not in
conference.
Provo now, but in Provo, yeah.
Yeah, and it was great. So I got to go pitch the Utah Angels, spend a couple hours with them, getting kind of, I'll say, like beat up and a lot of really tough questions. But
Why is this so infamously like a grill session? Like
This
you
one-
talked
no,
about it
this
that
now
way.
I would
No,
look
no.
at it as a friendly conversation. Back then, I'm like,
You were just
I
a
got all this
novice
stress.
and you were just
Yeah.
like,
But he's one student. He's a current student, okay, and he's in with at least 8 really seasoned investors. And but here's the funny thing, and this is for listener viewers to understand: when investors behave that way, that is true interest.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
you got to understand when politeness and not much talking happens in a pitch session. That's
a bad
not good.
sign.
That's
Bad
not
sign.
good.
Yeah.
What you want is them on the edge of their seat, pummeling you with questions.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to him. And he did so well.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Of the, like I said, thousands I've seen, and let's even say he's definitely in the top 0.2%.
No, yeah, we definitely have venture pitches that were grilling the founder, but that is an indicator of
yeah.
interest, right?
Yeah.
So walk me through that pitch session. Like, what advice would you give to today's entrepreneurs that are going into a make or break pitch situation?
If you're looking for advice going into that make or break pitch session, it might be too late for my advice. My advice would be, it would actually, like, what prepared me for that pitch session was months and months of working on the business plan and the pitch. Like, that business plan was a huge blessing for us.
Yeah.
To be able to be a part of that competition, I still have every one of the 24 versions of the business plan that I wrote.
Yeah.
Like, I have hard copies of every single one. I have digital copies of every one. I keep them in a little special folder on my computer to
Like
remind
pen and
me.
paper?
Yeah.
I guess this is what, 2003?
It was all typed up, right? It was really nice. I had them like, I'd go to Kinko's and get them hard spiral bound. And every time we do a little change or anything, we would go get another copy printed.
Yeah.
Because we're like, all right, the next round of conversations we're going to give an updated version. Well, what would happen is every time I would go into a pitch, informal or formal, with a BYU mentor or somebody that had been assigned to us by the business plan competition to look over our business plan, I would listen for their feedback and I would listen to the questions. And then I would take what I would say like the most challenging questions, and I would try to incorporate answers of those into the business plan and into the pitch, right? And there's nothing that makes you great at pitching like pitching.
Yes.
Like the more you can pitch, the better you are on your feet, the more you get the hard questions and even the questions that will completely stump you. I would walk away saying, thank you. Like this is great.
Specifically, let me just share what you've heard me say this 1,000 times, and now here's where it came from. I would be listening as an investor, write down a question I wanted to ask during Q&A, and then in the presentation, he would answer that question before I had a chance to ask it.
Because you were so familiar.
Yeah. When that happens, an investor goes, man, this is a CEO that's on his game. I could invest in him.
So
and then I want to say during the Q&A, which is most of the time of any kind of meeting, when we ask a question, he would go, good question. Let me answer that. And he knew how to go to a slide that was like a backup slide and explain it to me.
Yeah. So there's two different things.
Really,
here.
really good.
Like there's one really great thing that I learned really early on. And I learned this from Gavin Christensen because he was like what do they call him? Like my MBA mentor, because we didn't have any MBAs on our team. They signed Gavin, and struck of luck to get Gavin assigned to me. Still a good friend to this day, still a great supporter. Gavin introduced me to the book, Guy Kawasaki, The Art of the Start. And Guy in that book talks about it's like the 10, 20, 30 rule. 10 slides. There's 10 very specific slides, and you have to keep it super simple. And the pitch itself is like, you got to like kind of dumb it down to make it's almost like 10 individual little elevator pitches. It's 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. Yeah. And you got to be able to get through your entire pitch, hit the competitive dynamics, the pain, the solution.
In Start Ignition, exactly what we teach people.
And then you have your ending slide. And then behind that, I would have my appendix.
Yeah.
Of everything.
That was chock full.
Yeah. Of everything else that I would know. All right, this is like my utility belt that whatever else gets thrown at me, I got a slide I can go to answer a question if it's not already in one of the first 10.
So one of the things like when you're preparing is you want to ask yourself, what's the 3 hardest questions an investor could ever ask me that would really expose my weaknesses, and have an answer for them.
Yeah. And so you were just good at that. And again, maybe you could say it was that business plan competition that prepared you months and months and months of time going over and getting so familiar.
Yeah, and look, and if you don't have a business plan, or if you haven't entered into a business plan competition,
it's also mentorship though.
There's mentorship, and there are a lot of people out there that if you call them and say, hey, I would love to do lunch with you. I mean, I can't tell you the number of, I'm not like soliciting this like broadly, because I'd like book out lunches for weeks in advance. But if there is an entrepreneur that calls me, reaches out on LinkedIn, emails me, messages me, texts me, you name it, and says, hey, I'm a startup CEO. I'm trying to figure this out. Can I pick your brain for 30 minutes? Can I do lunch?
Yep.
The answer is always yes.
Yeah. I think you got 3 guys at this table that are always going to say yes to those.
Yeah. Why?
Those
because
requests.
we've been on the other side of that. And I had people early on in my career that said yes, that changed the trajectory of my career, my life. Sure. And so I will 100%
those hard questions you had to answer to, they had to come from somewhere. It's mentorship. It's those people that told those and pulled those out and pulled your attention to them.
Yeah. And there's something really powerful about, at a point in time in an entrepreneurial journey, every entrepreneur's journey, we have self-doubt and we question, is this a good idea? Can I really succeed at this? Is there something here? When you get in front of other smart business people that have more experience than you, that have done this before, that will pressure test your ideas. And if they come out on the other end of that saying, I think there's something here, I think you should keep going.
Yeah.
What a boost of confidence.
Yeah.
And I've done this for people that John sends my way. I'm like, hey, don't give up, keep going. You have something here. When it gets really hard, guess what? That's really good news, because all of your competition that's at the same phase trying to figure this out and it gets really hard, most of them are going to drop off.
Yeah.
If you stick with it, there's a great chance you can succeed.
Yeah.
So was the business model that you went through the business plan competition the same that you pitched to the Utah Angels?
100% the same.
Okay. So then you pitched and we funded you.
Yep.
And then
raised how much?
We raised $2 million.
You raised the $2 million.
Yes, we raised the $2 million, closed the round, got to work. Grew the business, had a really great year. 2004 to 2005 was awesome. I think we went from 0 to 250, not quite 0. I mean, we had a little bit like $10,000 a month, and we went to $250,000 a month.
Wow.
Over the course of a year. Had our first $1 million quarter, and then decided to go back out and raise a Series B round. So probably 18 months later. That round, we did, we did the whole kind of Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road tour and ended up selecting a local Utah VC that's now Signal Peak. It was V-Spring Capital at the time. And it was Scott Petty was the main partner. And I remember I had a term sheet. I had 2 term sheets from Silicon Valley. And I had another local VC term sheet, and then I had the term sheet from Scott Petty. And I had board members that were pretty adamant that I should take the out-of-state Silicon Valley money. And I will just tell you, like, in retrospect, there are decisions we make that change the trajectory of our story that we don't understand the impact of at the time. Selecting the term sheet from Signal Peak and Scott Petty was one of those moments for me.
Yeah.
I feel like I lucked out with the most patient, supportive, kind of committed investor you could imagine. He's just been great over he's been in Alianza now for 18, going on 19 years. What other VC would you imagine sticking around for that long, believing, supporting, and encouraging over that long a period of time? And it does, and we'll get into this. It doesn't mean that it's been like a smooth road the whole time. Like there's a lot of times when our incentives are misaligned, our hopes about how we view the company evolving differ. And there's been some really hard conversations over that 19-year period. But when you get people that stick with you through that, boy, like, do you come out of that with strong relationships, trust, great stories.
Yeah. So walk me through the next few years after that. Then.
So the next few years get really interesting.
I know you run into 2008.
So that first investment from V-Spring was what year?
2006.
2006. Okay.
Yep.
So it was about 2004, I think we did the angel investment.
2005.
2005 was? Okay,
yep. So it's about 16, 18 months later, we did the round.
You were chugging along, $250K a month.
Yeah.
You went out into the VC world. You raised a good, healthy round.
The right.
Yeah.
Like, things are great. We're building the team. We're winning customers. And then
all on this VoIP.
Yeah. All selling multinational enterprises on cloud communication systems where we're taking their voice and putting it on the internet for the very first time.
Yep.
Yeah. And being able to save a lot of money in long distance telecommunications.
Totally. Yeah. But it was a services business.
Yes.
Meaning, as we scaled the business, there was a lot, like, we had to scale our sales team, scale, install, and support, and marketing, and finance, and collections. And so it was one of the really early lessons I learned is, like, the business was scaling at the same rate that our headcount was scaling. And I was like, all right, we have a business here. It's growing. We've proven product market fit. And we think we can continue to scale this business. And so we went out into the market, and we're now 2 years later, now fast forward to early, 2006, 2007, early 2008, we have a term sheet signed for a $6 million Series C. Now, everybody that's probably listening is like, oh, $6 million Series C. Back in 2008, that was actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah, for sure.
Numbers have changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
But we actually got term sheets signed. Then we got definitive documents signed, and we thought, great, we're going to go raise a Series C, and we're going to keep growing the business. And we thought this was kind of the last round we'd ever do. Like, famous words of an entrepreneur. This is the last round we'll ever do.
Yeah.
Don't ever say that because things change. But in the midst of when the deal was finalizing and coming together, the market was falling apart. The market was falling apart like it never had before, like in many, many, many
When
decades.
you say the market, people are going to think maybe you're just talking about your market.
Yeah, I'm talking about the U.S. economy.
You actually need to say the world's economy.
Yeah,
the
world economy caused by the U.S. housing crisis. Venture funds were publishing articles to entrepreneurs calling it like the Holocaust. Like buckle up. This is going to be painful. A lot of companies will die. Buckle up and get ready for a long, slow
it really was bad
recovery.
It really was.
But
bad.
you raised the $6 million in 2008.
So, all right.
Okay, so you had the term sheet said.
Yeah.
So the important thing for our viewers and listeners to know, especially those that maybe weren't alive then or in the business world, which would count on it'd be your situation, is 2008 was the beginning of what many people had not seen since the Great Depression.
Yeah.
It was that bad of an economy.
It was just, it was really difficult. And so what had happened is we, like I said, we closed what we thought was the round, all except for the funding. Meanwhile, back up 6 months, our current investors had been bridge loaning the company funds and surviving on everything we could to get to this round. And when I say everything we could, we can get into it if John wants to. But there was a lot of like, I'd say rookie, inexperienced decision making that took place. And when our board said, Brian, stretch every penny you have, we literally stretched every penny we had. We made some really bad decisions, including not paying our payroll taxes. So we would pay people and we would withhold payroll taxes. But we're like, okay, cool. This round's coming. It's going to come like 6 months from now. We're just going to withhold those taxes. We're going to use them for operating the business. And when the round closes, we'll pay our taxes and catch back up. Problem was that round never closed. The investor that we had signed documents with failed on their capital call. Their limited partner didn't come through.
And that happened.
And
that
the
happened
round
to
blew up.
everybody in 2008.
In the VC world?
2008, it really kind of started in Utah in August 2007. But going from January 2008 to December 2008 was one of the worst business periods in history.
Was really difficult. And
They call it the Great Recession for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And so we're literally like just scraping by. And then the round falls apart and our investors are left hanging out there with a bunch of bridge loans that are converting now into a round that just evaporated in the worst economic market since the Great Depression. And so now we have like big conundrum on our hands. And I had investors that would come to me and say, Brian, like you should throw in the towel. Like this is not going to work. And I had probably
why? Because of the debt, because of the convertible debt?
Yeah, the convertible debt that was hanging out
Was
there.
the terms just horrible?
The
Well,
market,
if it doesn't convert to equity, it's got to be paid back at some point.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
debt. But and unless you had or sometimes convertible debt for our viewers and listeners, no, convertible debt starts as debt. It's intended to be triggered by the next equity round and convert into that equity round. But if the equity round doesn't come, there's usually a term, a length to that debt.
Yeah, timeline.
And there's a day of reckoning where it has to be paid back in cash, or it can convert at such a low rate that it wipes everybody else out.
Is that that's what happened?
Yeah, no, it was that thought. So meantime, inside the business, remember, we're competing in Latin America, and we're essentially like, we'd opened up 9 branch offices. We had a team of 70 people selling services to enterprise customers. And the largest competitor we faced was Telmex. Telmex is owned by Carlos Slim, one of the wealthiest people in the world, who had built his wealth off the back of Telmex, the largest telco in Latin America. And they own 96% of the market. And they were also the largest ISP. So they're selling internet services and phone services. And somewhere along the prior 2 years journey, they figured out what this little company, Alianza, GetPhone, in Utah was doing. We were convincing their customers to drop their high margin voice services with Telmex and put their voice on top of their internet that we didn't pay anything for, right? And this is back before net neutrality existed.
So just to be super clear, South American business which was paying a lot of money to Telmex for long distance calls to go beyond their local calling. And instead they went onto the internet with your software and tools and did those same voice calls for free.
That's right. Totally. And so
paying you a flat subscription.
Yeah. Paying us a subscription fee.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so Telmex figured out what we were doing. Enough customers left. We got enough press. Like it was a really interesting kind of lot of buzz around the business in Latin America. And so Telmex, like I said, this is before net neutrality. Telmex started blocking ports, like literally blocking our traffic in and out of Mexico. And so we would do things like, then we'd change our ports to something else and we get the traffic back up and running. Like, all right, we survived, like we're back in business. And they would figure out the new ports and they'd start blocking those. And it became this game of like whack-a-mole where we're like dynamically changing which internet ports we use to get into Latin America and get out. And meanwhile, the revenue that had been on kind of this nice, smooth, up and to the right curve stagnated. And you got like 3 quarters in a row of just revenue.
Choppy water.
Choppy water. And choppy in the sense that like we're now facing big existential risk on 2 different fronts inside the business. One, funding. And the whole dynamic around our Series C round falling apart. 2 was all around the technology itself and the competitive threat of the dominant operator in the market.
They weren't a national company. They weren't like a country-backed or government-backed company.
They were government-backed, but then they'd been privatized by Carlos Slim.
I was going to say, I thought Telmex was the Mexican telephone
They were
company.
for a very long time until Carlos Slim bought it and privatized it.
Hey, I need to pause because this is important for viewers and listeners and just for me too. When you did the payroll tax thing, I just want to say this. You did get in trouble for that.
Yeah.
And you had to pay penalties.
100%.
And you cleared it up and did the right thing and everything. And you know,
yeah, no.
everybody understands why you did it and what you did. I just want everybody to understand that, none of us at this table would condone that to do that, and that's probably something you should avoid at all costs. I just want to make sure. And the idea was in a month or two you were going to get money in, and it wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, look, because we had a term sheet signed from a reputable
when the
investor.
money didn't come, it became a big deal, and you did get into some hot water from it.
Yeah,
and you
totally.
but you took care of it and took care of it.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to know Brian's one of the most honest, integrity guys I know.
Like legal trouble,
but just like certified mail delivered to my house saying, hey, like, you got to pay these taxes or else.
Yeah,
right?
and don't mess with the tax man.
You paid interest and penalty, I'm sure.
Yeah, totally.
That's just the way it goes in business. And that's the thing. I just want everybody to know, because we teach, that's one thing to avoid, and you just don't want to do that. It's way better to go get a mentor and get help and find some other way to come up with some extra cash than that as a source of cash. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to make sure. Okay. Back to this though. Keep going.
Okay, so let's see. So Telmex. All right, so we kind of decided somewhere along this journey that, like, look, the market's bad, the funding's bad, we can't go out and raise money. We're either going to have to like significantly reduce force in the company, or we're going to have to find a partner or sell the company.
Yeah.
And so we started talking with AT&T about partnering with us. We said, look, AT&T terminates a substantial amount of Telmex's traffic back into the United States. So when one of these Mexican customers or Latin American
and I want
customers,
everybody to know this AT&T is now the renamed Southwestern Bell. Is that right? Or was AT&T still a long distance company then?
At the time, it was a long distance company.
So it is the old AT&T that kept the long distance.
Yeah, and it was a joint venture in Mexico.
Got it.
Under the brand name. They went by either AT&T Latin America or Lestra.
Got it. Okay.
At the time. And we thought, all right, they're terminating a bunch of traffic for Latin American enterprise customers that call back to the United States. They have a vested interest in what we're doing. So we started talking to them about a partnership, and they said, you know what? We're way better at buying than partnering. Would you be interested to a transaction where we buy the company? And of course, we were like, absolutely. Challenge was, it wasn't really like, there wasn't a substantial return for investors in this. And at the last minute, they came back and said, look, we like the product, we like the brand, we like the channel and the customers you've built. We think this is like the future of business communications, but we're not interested in buying your platform and the intellectual property you've built. We would really like it if you would operate that for us for 6 months while we move all these customers to an in-house platform that we built using Cisco infrastructure. And at the time, Cisco's a big market leader. You know, the old adage, nobody gets fired for choosing Cisco. And so we said, okay, sure, let's do it. So we essentially went back to our investors, and John will remember this. We had some meetings with them. We're like, hey, we can either return these royalties back to our investors, or we have the next business idea. If you're interested, we think we got something that's way bigger, way more interesting, way more compelling, and we're going to pivot the company. In this transaction, we ended up with the intellectual property to the platform, and we're currently managing it on behalf of AT&T. So this business plan and the next hypothesis was, what if we created this multi-tenant architecture around the platform now, and we could license it to many different broadband operators and telcos, and we could become the back end for all of their core communications network. And mind you, this is at a point in time when all the communications providers globally are deploying physical hardware and software and managing it inside their networks. And we were the first in the market watching, on the heels of Netflix and AWS and some of the early cloud innovators to say, we should put this software stack in the cloud. We should be, a fully managed cloud operating platform for service providers. And our investors, every single one of them said, we'll support you on the next journey. We'll roll it forward, Brian. Keep going. And so we did. It wasn't without bumps and bruises, because remember, we're just on the heels of this transaction. AT&T took 70 of our 78 employees or so. We're left with a small team of employees managing this platform, starting from ground zero, essentially, with one customer now. And this round of capital that we were just going to raise had just fallen apart months earlier. And so we hadn't paid back our bridge loans. And so now we had a decision, how are we going to fund this? Because it wasn't profitable at this point. We only had the one customer. And we thought, if we're going to grow this, it's going to take more capital. And that required another really hard discussion with investors, board members around recapitalizing the company. And this is often people think the word recapitalize and they kind of cringe. When I think of the word recapitalization, it means a reattribution of value based on new money that's coming in. It's a survival tactic.
Yeah.
Because in some ways, look, this is one of the great things about having sophisticated investors around the table. I'm supremely grateful for John and other investors that helped hold my hand through this process of Brian, this isn't the end of the story. This isn't wiping away kind of your equity or your wealth, but you have a new class of investor that's willing to continue to back you, you have to reset expectations on valuation with your old investors, and specifically your old investors that are no longer willing to back you. And there was kind of a separation in those investors, like those that were, willing to continue to fund the company and those that wouldn't or couldn't, and kind of had to lick their wounds on the prior results of Alianza 1.0.
So did you sell the company to AT&T or that product?
We ended up doing an asset sale where they purchased the customer base, the revenue, the brand.
Was there no?
channel.
Was
So
there?
Alianza 1.0, the product was sold to AT&T.
Yeah, but wasn't there?
70 of 78 employees went there. And then Alianza 2.0, the new business model, a pivot, stayed with about 8 employees. And the problem, though, is that entity kept the debt and had to find a way to relieve that debt.
Was there
burden.
no? There was no cash or transaction from that.
Remember,
sale?
it was a royalty. So they were giving us a royalty to manage the platform on their behalf.
Yes.
And at first it was, hey, we're going to run this for you for 6 months while you move it to your Cisco platform. Well, that 6 months ended up being 6 years, and they became an anchor tenant on what became the Alianza that exists today.
Yeah. So what happened, though, what he's talking about in this recapitalization, we would call it a down round or a cram down. What the end result was, it was a pay to play, where if you were going to continue and support them as an existing investor, put new money in, and then there's new money is coming in from, or that situation, if you put money in, you kind of held your position and your percentage in the company going forward. But if you didn't pay to play, you were going to get seriously crammed down in your percentage of the company. My specific recollection, if I can share it, I, for instance, had about, I think, 3% of the company, or I can't remember, or I don't know, 2 point whatever percent of the company, and I was going to go down to 1/100th of that.
Yeah.
If I didn't put more money in. But I was one of the last ones to say I'd put more money in because there were 2 things I didn't like. I didn't think they were kind of committing firmly enough to Brian and how his situation would be afterwards. And so I came in and said, you need a way for us to protect our position as investors, and you got to get Brian. He is the CEO. This is his company. He's got to be at the helm. I want to have assurances before I put this money in that he's getting enough percentage of this company going forward to make him the CEO manager he needs to be. I remember saying that specifically. I stood up and said that, and they did change things to make that all happen. I think 1.5 hours before the deadline, I put my money in.
No, it was. I can remember it was like Christmas Eve, and I was in a movie with my family on a Saturday. And I step out from the movie, take a call from John, talk with one of my board members. We're down to kind of this like term around my personal stake in the business and what was going to be the treatment of my founder's shares.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of drawn a line in the sand, and John gave me the fortitude, like, Brian, get a firm back, firm constitution, stand up and say, this is where I'm at. And if this doesn't work, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I remember like, John, it's just like so not my style to like finally draw a line in the sand. He's like, Brian, you just have to know where your kind of cutoff point is, where it no longer makes sense for you. And he's like, I need like, for him to come in and invest, he's like, I need you here and I need you fully committed. And I was like, well, if you want me fully committed, this is what it's going to take.
Yeah.
And it would not have worked
there's
without
the line.
It would not have worked without Brian. That's the problem. As an investor, sure, I like Brian. I want to do good by Brian, but it's actually thinking of everybody and the company. Brian had to be the one going forward. Anyway, I'm glad how that worked out because we got the deal done with all the right things happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally. And this was kind of our second near-death experience.
And that's when Brian and I really, we were just kind of really got in the same tent together. Yeah. And I felt good about what I was doing for Brian, and he was grateful for it. And then after that, Brian took the company. Tell the rest of the story.
On the 2.0 idea.
Yeah. So then, I mean, look, I wouldn't say like the hard times were over, but we certainly had like a new lease on life. And by 2010, we kind of fast forward.
So
another couple
how much
years.
of an injection of cash was put into Alianza at that time from that cramming down and then optioning back up? And
it was not as much as you would think it was. Like there was ended up being over 24 bridge loans put into the business and over 20, when I say small, sub 50,000, 60,000 equity investments, like a crumb here.
I'm going to guess between 1 and 2 million, something like that.
Yeah. Couple
What did you do with the notes then? Did they just disappear? And
No, then we ended up doing this recap, raising a bunch of money, converting all the notes into that round.
Oh, into that round.
So everybody that had invested in notes and convertibles
Cleaned up all the debt.
converted.
Cleaned up all the debt.
Cleaned up all the debt and gave us a
It
new lease
literally
on
was
life.
a complete recapitalization of everything. Even everybody. You can't recapitalize without recapitalizing everything. But yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so fast forward 2 more years, we felt like this new model of essentially providing a cloud communications platform for operators was getting legs. On the heels of the Great Recession, when we were at the bottom of it, the government came out with this American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. Very similar to other ones they've done since, but where they invest money into infrastructure. And one of the areas they decided to invest money into was rural broadband build out. And so there was immense amount of public government funding available to ISPs and entrepreneurs that were building new companies. And we thought to ourselves, hey, this is a great early market for us. We're going to go, because a lot of the entrenched legacy kind of top telcos had their way of doing things, and they were working with very well-established operators or vendors, right?
Yeah.
Like Cisco that I mentioned before. And so we thought, all right, here's a new, what we called a greenfield market. These are new startups. They're going to be entering the market for the very first time. They don't have this century-long history of providing voice services like the telcos do. We can go provide them with this solution. So we went in, we made a name for ourselves in that market, and we signed up 20 customers. By that point, we'd probably doubled revenue back. We were kind of back to where we were and double that. So we're probably like almost approaching $5 million a year in revenue. And then something really terrible happened. All of those government loans started coming due. The first payment started coming due. And what the government did not realize is the time that was needed between deployment of capital and building out of these new networks and then monetizing those, how long that would really take. And within a 6-month period, half of our customers declared bankruptcy. This was kind of, the third near-death experience at Alianza, where we finally felt like, all right, we built this company up to $250,000 a month. We almost died. We sold it. We got a new lease on life. We recapitalized the company. We went out, found our second product market fit, and then half our customers went bankrupt, and the other ones kind of just stagnated or went away.
Yeah.
Terribly difficult time. And somehow, there's a whole slew of like longer stories and little miracles that helped us survive, but the business survived. And on the heels of that, emerged a company that has now rattled off almost 14 years of consecutive growth without a down quarter. What you learn through those hard times, like the grit you develop, the stick-to-itiveness, the fortitude. Now when hard things come along, we don't even flinch. We're just like, of course we'll be fine. We'll get through this. We've seen way worse.
Was there a tipping point in that journey of where you felt you were out of just survival mode and you were into scaling growth mode? Where you felt like, oh my gosh, I'm out of the crap and I'm into the up and the right? Or did it always just kind of feel like I'm just building, I'm just adding on revenue?
Yeah, I think for me, and I don't know if this is a personality trait, I don't ever really feel like I've arrived. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm on a journey that I signed up for that I've never really felt closure or finality or hey, the end of the book is written yet. This is one of the things that's really interesting about the Alianza journey is I'm now 20 years into it. I'm having the best time I've ever had as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, let's get into it. Because right now, Alianza, just even in the last few months, has become a major player, done major acquisitions.
Yeah.
Your revenue's going through the roof, all of that.
Yeah.
But refresh again, how did you segue from those 10 going bankrupt customers out of the 20? And how did you get to where you're so wildly successful?
So that third debt.
Okay, so I will tell the story.
Yeah.
So,
real quickly.
Yeah, all right. So we essentially, half our customers had declared bankruptcy. All of a sudden our revenue's cut in half. We're burning cash like crazy again. And we have less than 6 months survival. And we know, look, we have eked every ounce of patience out of our investors. They've taken 2 different chances on us. This is the third strike. There's no way we can go back to them.
Did you go
again.
back to them?
We did not. So there was one company amongst all those wireless ISPs that was 2 orders of magnitude larger than the next closest one. It was a company called Clearwire. Clearwire had raised a few $1 billion in financing, bought a bunch of spectrum, and was deploying what they called the world's first WiMAX network. WiMAX essentially sat in between 2G and 3G on wireless evolution. And I remember I saw a conference where their president of the company, Mike Sievert, who you might recognize that name, went on to do some really cool things at T-Mobile and others, was speaking at a conference in Chicago called WiMAX World. And I thought, you know what, if I could just convince Mike of what we're doing and the value that we could bring them, that one customer could save our business.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm staring at a cliff on revenue, and I'm like, look, like the time's like clicking, clock's ticking down. There's one shot we have here. And I cornered Mike after his keynote speech at the conference, and I gave him like the 30-second elevator pitch, and I gave him my business card. And he said, Brian, here's who you need to talk to inside the company. A gentleman named John Saw, who's the CTO of the company. He's like, you need to talk to John. John owns this decision. I said, would you introduce me to him? And that spawned a 2-month flurry of activity where we somehow convinced Clearwire to sign a commercial contract with us. What's really interesting is at the same time we're doing that, there was one other customer that we'd kind of been dancing with for a year and a half called Viasat. They were one of the first satellite broadband companies to ever launch. So we talked today about like Starlink and SpaceX launching like the low Earth orbit satellite networks. These guys were geosynchronous orbit, so a little bit higher altitude satellites, but they launched the industry's first and kind of preeminent back in the day satellite broadband network. We'd been testing with them and doing proof of concepts for over a year and a half, but we could just never get a commercial deal over the finish line. So we had these two customers that kind of, either one of them signing with us would kind of, we felt like, ensure business continuity going forward. Mm-hmm. But neither one I remember both of these companies coming out and meeting with us at our tiny little shared space conference room where our, co-founder Scott Bell, who ran finance at the time, his office was in the break room, and he literally a room half the size of this room, and half of it was like our utility where there was like, napkins and markers and toilet paper, and then the other side was our snack room, which is like the other snack room, right? It was just it was a like bookshelf with peanut M&Ms and like red vines and whatever else would like keep us going. And then you'd have like, one of the most successful wireless ISPs in the world sent their BD guy to come talk to us and walked through the office. And then this Jim Esserman, who was the EVP over corporate development at Viasat, came out like 2 weeks later. Both of them independently told me, Brian, like, we love you guys. We love what you're doing. The technology's cool. There's just no way we can work with a company your size. Like, you're just too small. And so we kind of derived this like conniving plan that we would write up a press release for both deals as if we'd won them. And then we sent them to each other. Saying essentially like, hey, they're signing with us. Like this deal, like you're not going to be the only big customer. We're going to have 2 anchor customers. You're going to be the second
awesome.
one. So it's de-risked the deal for them, right? And somehow both of them independently said, all right, we're in. Like we changed the tide. Like both those have like twists and turns and a longer story. I'll spare you the details. But we signed both those deals and our revenue went north of $1 million a month.
Wow.
Within 6 months. Like it was fast. Now, the flip side of this, like I'll give you like, this is our 4th near-death experience. Okay. And you'll see why. Within 2 months after closing the Clearwire deal, Clearwire announced that it was getting bought by Sprint. And Sprint came out immediately and said, we only wanted Clearwire for the spectrum that they own. We do not want their customers. We don't want their business model. We're shutting it down.
Wow.
And so over the course of we kind of knew then that this $1 million a month revenue stream that we had was going to zero over the next 3 years. And so we knew we had 3 years to develop an alternate business plan, an alternate model, and a new customer segment that we had to go deploy and find product market fit and scale before we ran out of cash again. And luckily we did that. It took, Viasat 3 more years to launch their satellite and get into market and start scaling revenue. But in that time period, we went out and signed our first cable company up and slowly started scaling the business. And that's 2010, 2013, probably since 2012. Haven't had a down quarter in revenue.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Awesome.
That's
insane.
insane.
And real quick to end, because we're short on time, right? So you might have, just looking at where we're at, in the last few months, though, like the biggest things have happened to your company just in like the last, just what's happened recently that's so big to give our listeners and viewers a kind of an idea of the magnitude of what you're doing.
Yeah. All right. So kind of, the company had been growing really nicely. surpassed 250 employees. Like I said, every quarter is just a little bit up and to the right. Like it's the little engine that could. We just kept plugging away. And we developed something really special in the market that takes a lot of investment over more than a decade to be able to build what we built. It's a highly technical platform with relatively small sales and marketing team, right? And so we'd kind of, every chance we'd had along the way, we'd always invested in technology. And we kind of had this underlying belief and thesis that if we developed the best platform,
It would sell itself.
Eventually would sell itself and the market would turn our way. So every time we had a choice on like, where do we invest our capital?
Product.
Invest in sales or marketing or product. It was always product.
Yep.
And over the course of the last few years, we realized that we now had something that had a defensible moat around it, right? It wasn't just competing in the market with great positioning, great marketing. It was competing in the market from a position of product superiority. And our competitors started to see it. And some of those competitors, being much, much larger than us, had no product roadmap. Like they'd kind of given up on the ability to cloudify their legacy solutions and just said, we're going to manage these for cash.
Yeah.
One of those was Microsoft. Microsoft had a product line that we were really interested in based on a technology called Metaswitch. 2.5 years ago, we made an unsolicited inbound offer to Microsoft to buy that business. And they kind of laughed us out of the room. They said, there's no way. Like, there's no way we're selling this business. It's core to what we do. We're really excited about it. Get out of here. And once a quarter, we'd kind of reach back out, kind of keep them warm. Hey, how's it going? Like, here's what we could do with this if we owned it. Here's what we'd be doing. And we think it actually really benefits Microsoft. And here's how it ties into your strategy. And the answer for 2.5 years pretty consistently was no. And then on June 3rd last year, 2024, the phone rang, and it was the Corp VP of Azure. And he said, Brian, are you still ready to do this deal? And we said, kind of caught me off guard. And I was like, absolutely, yes. Like, let's go. And so when he said, Brian, hey, speed is really important to us. Like we want to move really quickly. It took us less than a week to have a term sheet in front of him. And then it took 6 more months of working through the Microsoft machine to get from term sheet to definitive agreement signed. And then it took another 3 months to close the deal. So it was a 9-month long dance and process, but we ended up closing that deal. And it really literally is like probably fast forwarded Alianza 5 or 10 years on progress.
So basically, Alianza, your company, you, Brian, bought a unit of Microsoft.
Yeah.
And you and Warren Buffett do things like that, apparently, because that's what Warren Buffett does, Walmart, Microsoft, whatever. That's amazing. That's congratulations on doing such a thing like that. That's a great experience in life.
Thanks, John.
That Microsoft deal, what made them finally say, okay, now we're ready? Was there a reason behind that, or?
They changed. So we actually, in the interim between when we made our original offer and when they came back to us, we'd struck a deal with AWS, their number one competitor.
Yeah.
And we started deploying services with AWS. And I think they saw how we were succeeding and how AWS's partnership strategy was more attractive to the market than their strategy of kind of vertically integrating. And so they made a strategic decision that they were going to
compete.
Like we're going to change our go-to-market strategy.
Yeah.
And we no longer want to own what they called the network functions business. We want to partner there. And so they decided the only way for us to get out of this and truly partner is to sell this vertically integrated solution to the best buyer in the market. And in the very first conversation they had with me, they said, Brian, our number one criteria is taking care of our customers. And we want to sell to the entity we can trust. And I came to find out later in the process that part of their diligence on us as the buyer was calling their top 5 customers and asking them who they wanted to sell the company to. If, how interesting is that they would call their customer and be like, hey, we're going to sell this. Like we made a strategic change. Who do you want us to sell it to? Here's a few names we're considering. And every one of them said we want it to be Alianza.
All 5. That's cool.
That's amazing.
Brian, that is amazing. That is really, really good. 2 more things to cover, and then you can wrap up when you want to, Tyler. Tyler's our host. He's fine for the greatest moderator in the world. But 2 things. So first thing is chips off the table.
Yeah.
Okay. I said that early on, and we have a lot of startup folks watching. So, that's kind of interesting. What does that mean when I say you finally got chips off the table? What does that mean?
Yeah, it means for a long time as an entrepreneur, stock, your founder's shares are locked up inside the company. A lot of us founders for a very long time, we are stock rich and cash poor.
So asset rich, cash poor.
Yeah, your stock is worth something, but we're working for discounted salaries.
Your equity in this company was worth a lot of money,
Yeah.
but you couldn't go buy anything.
Yeah, totally.
Because you're talking big numbers, and you've raised this round, that round, doing big deals, doing that.
So taking chips off the table, did that happen as a carve out of another investment round, or how did you take chips off the table?
Yeah, I took a small amount of chips off the table.
Just we don't need to say the amount, but the mechanism.
Yeah, the mechanism is we raised a round and we had the opportunity to oversubscribe the round.
Yes.
Right. There was more interest in the round than we were targeting to raise.
When was this round?
This is a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So a footnote of this podcast episode, just something to write down if you're an entrepreneur, is that at some point in your life cycle, when a round of investments coming in, usually a growth round, there's an opportunity for the founders to finally get liquidity on some of their stock and get some financial comfort in life. And that's called a carve out or taking chips off the table. And you got that opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's the right thing. And why investors want that too to happen is that gives you comfort in life. So you're focused on growing the business, not saying, hey, I've gone all these years without liquidity. I need to get liquid. By them letting you have some liquidity, the pressure's off and you can focus on even growing to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think I look back and I think like as an investor, lesson learned, there will come a time in every entrepreneur's journey where taking some liquidity off the table is investor friendly.
Yes.
Meaning like you get to a point in the company's evolution where so much of your net worth is locked up inside of this business. Yeah. And what that causes in some ways is this mentality of I have to protect my downside.
Yes.
I put so much into this for so long. I don't want to swing for the fences. I'm going to go for a base hit. And what this did for me is it unleashed me at a point in time that was really important
to go for the grand slam. That's what your new investors want you to do.
That's exactly what they want.
What I teach in our boot camp is this. I say, I take them through the rounds of investment in a normal illustrative cadence, right? And I say, these first few rounds, they want you to feel like if this thing fails, your whole life goes down the tube. Yeah. Because they want you, they don't want you liquid. They want you working like crazy to create value. But then there comes a point where you're so far along in the company that they're saying, no, I'm putting money in the company and I want you to be financially strong enough to not think about you got to take the next lowball deal.
I don't have to worry about my kids' college education anymore.
And you're not going to take a lowball deal that allows that recent investor to only get a modest return. They want to get 10 times their money from your efforts. So you have to have some financial comfort so that you can say, yeah, I'm comfortable. And I'll wait for that 10x deal instead of taking a 1.5x deal.
Exactly like you said, swinging for the fences. That enables that swing for the fence.
Yeah, it's good. Anyway.
Let's wrap it up a little bit, but one last question for me is all of these rounds you've had at Alianza, what is the total dollar amount that you have funded from day one? Can you say those numbers?
Yeah. I mean, if you want just equity or equity and debt.
Well, I guess
did all the debt did some debt get paid back?
Yeah, did
all the debt get turned into equity?
Like we just let's see. How do I
Because you have a pretty prolific fundraising history.
Was there any convertible debt that got paid back in cash, or did it all go to equity?
It all went to equity.
Okay, so
everybody rolled
total
forward.
financing, debt, and equity.
So then everything.
The debt became
then,
equity.
like this last transaction that we just did, buying the company from Microsoft, we did a big portion of it in debt.
So total equity, including convertible debt,
over 100 million.
Okay, and
well over 100 million.
And then you got some debt on top of that. So there. So that brings me to this question, because I think a lot of our listeners would like me to ask this question, and it'd be a fun question. Yeah. No specifics, but am I going to be happy as an early investor?
Oh my gosh, John, you're going to be thrilled.
Okay, that's what we like to hear.
Especially given like the dark days of when you probably like almost wrote Alianza completely off.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get
it's a great in the trenches, roll up your sleeve, put your freaking boots on, get to work, and make something happen, right?
Yeah. And don't let the dark days get you down. Just keep going.
I mean, I've heard some pretty historic stories of one death, but 4 almost close calls to death. That's pretty intense. Yeah. So awesome stuff.
And it's a compliment to Brian. So Brian, like I said, to get the success that you're seeing now is a zigzag. It's not a straight line, right?
Totally.
And also the skill set to be the CEO from the very start to even where you're at right now. Not everybody can pull that off, because, I said how incredible you were at pitching your early startup deal and how you got your first funding and all that. But to operate and run the company and get through, having 78 employees go down to 8 because 70 went to this, and how you also then built the company back up, and now you're at hundreds of employees and all that. And the management skill to have hundreds of employees and all this. For me, around 80 employees, I start not liking companies because it's not as, I love it when it's 20 or 40. And then when it gets over 100, it's just, so I tip my hat to you as a startup guy and also as an enterprise business manager.
Do you now have a head of HR?
Yes.
Do you have an in-house legal team?
Yes.
Yeah. That's
some crazy. He's heard me say, my signals are, the minute we hire an HR director or an in-house counsel, I'm out.
Yeah, those are some tough times.
No, but it's interesting. So we have almost 700 employees now.
700.
That's
spread
insane.
out across 20 different countries.
Yeah.
Very international, and I love it.
Yeah.
Like I have so loved getting to know every one of our team members.
I don't think the listener or viewer could understand the size of what you're doing from your previous timeline. So 700 employees, over 100 million raised.
When you pass Alianza headquarters on I-15 going down the Wasatch Front to Utah and you see Alianza on that big black building, you know that it started though as a student venture.
Yep.
And a young guy who was really good at his game, but still anybody in America can do this if they will put themselves into the game and be honest and play well.
No, yeah.
Do you agree with that statement?
I 100% agree with that statement. This is the American dream. Like there's no better nation on earth. There's no better state in our nation to start a business than Utah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's such a great place with such a great ecosystem, great resources. But if you're interested, like get in the game.
Yeah.
Now, just to close, just to bring it all home, like I mentored you and brought you through a lot of these processes as one of the guys that helping you and all that was so fun. And I did the same thing with Tyler. It's so fun. It's just so fun to see. Tyler one day called me up and says, Dad, I can't believe how fast the money's coming into our account. Yeah. and that's when a business starts taking off, and it's cool. Yeah. I've gone to lunch and with you, and you've updated me, and sometimes it was things are going bad, but things are going good. And it's just amazing. And so I just
but it's a story of patience, clarity, not getting disrupted by all the downtimes, and then also just the relentless go to it, get it done attitude. Because like you could have thrown in the towel a ton of times.
Yeah,
so.
This game's not for everybody.
Yeah,
but I believe so many could do it, and they just have to believe in themselves. And you've been an amazing person watching it. I want you to know I count you as a friend.
Absolutely.
But I also, and this is somebody that was a one-time mentor of yours, I look up to you too.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
That's
so mutual.
That's a great way to end it. So let's end it there. Thank you, Brian, so much for coming on.
Tyler, thank you for having me. John, great to be here again.
Yeah, thanks, you guys, man. You're the best. And honestly, thank you so much for making time.
Follow us, subscribe us.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to close out, but we have the CEO of 2025 from Utah Business here. Okay, he came on to our podcast. Thank you. You are leading the way with 700 employees. Thank you for taking the time to come here. So again, thank you so much. Yes, Startup Ignition Podcast. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. We are so appreciative of everything that's going on. Our viewership keeps going up, and we are so appreciative of every single one of you. So thank you. This is episode 14. Brian, thank you so much for coming, and we are out.